Alright, we're back again. Sounds like everything's working. Beautiful. We're back again. Let me update this one. All right. Boom. Let's do this one. And amazing. We're back again. So today we're just continuing a couple of the topics. On Twitch, we're obviously going to be focusing a little bit more on the far left critique stuff. So we'll see if we get anyone coming in from that. I need to close this. Need to get joined into here. There we go. And put out the good word. But yeah, we're mostly just going through a couple of different things today. Nothing too extraordinary. Yeah, nothing too crazy. I think generally speaking, we're going to be focusing a few different things in these streams. Obviously, if you're watching on a platform outside of Twitch, I mean, you're going to be getting more of the God debate type topics, and then on Twitch we're focusing more of the far left critique stuff. So we'll see if any of them come in. If you disagree, feel free to join the Discord and we can have a chat. But yeah, I think generally today one of the big topics, and the reason why the Twitch theme is what it is because we're generally looking into moral realism. That's the biggest project we're currently looking into. So I think as I've looked into moral realism, I think that there's several things I've noticed when atheists debate Christians. There's a couple issues that they just can't engage well with, or you just kind of end up slapping your forehead and ugh, dude. So one of those is basically sexual ethics. I think that for some reason atheists have a hard time accepting or biting bullets that should be easy to be bit. I saw a video the other day. One really good Christian apologist out there is Council of Trent, or Trent Horn, on YouTube. He was debating one of the new, I guess people call them gaytheists, a gay atheist type dude. And he basically brought up a very interesting thing, which is that you know, I have to be careful because this might get who cares about being flagged or whatever from TOS. But it basically, they brought up sexual ethics. So sodomy, stuff like that. And the atheists were unable to bite the bullet of like being in an uncommitted relationship and just sleeping around all over the place. They just can't just say like, oh, that's probably not the best behavior. Even if we don't make it illegal, we should probably discourage it as a society. And it's really, really strange to me. So I think one of our big projects now is going to be kind of engaging a little bit more with like far left people and just trying to curtail back some of their more wacky beliefs. That way, you know, we can kind of progress forward the broader conversations that need to be progressed forward. So we'll see if we end up with any more like far left people. They seem to be a big op at this point, so we'll certainly take debates from socialists and such, and like the far left people moving forward. I think that they're a bit problematic, so we'll see if we get more of them, and we'll definitely, especially on Twitch, be targeting them a little bit more. Now, generally, I think that we're still going to be focusing on some other stuff as well, but that's going to be like the big focus now. Just because I think that, yeah, it's been kind of a problem. I think as I watch these, like, I guess they're called gaytheists, but they can't bite bullets on stuff. A lot of them are anti-realists, and I don't know. I'd like to go through and basically start like a realist project or a moral realist project, because I think the anti-realism stuff is going a little bit too far. Yeah, I think we need a cohesive, like, ethical project amongst atheists. So that's going to be one of the big things I do now. We're going to be doing a little bit more of a dive on like meta-ethics and stuff, because, yeah, I think we just need to be able to bite the bullet on some of these like wackier topics, I guess. Hey, how's it going? How did you become an atheist? Probably 6 months to a year ago, I would say I became a full-on atheist. Before that, I was kind of like agnostic, just like, yeah, there could be a God, but don't really care about it, or I don't know if we could actually know about it. And then before that, I was like a hardcore Christian, grew up in a Christian household, like Protestant, evangelical Christians, or Baptist, both were in my household. And yeah, essentially I moved from Christian to atheist. My first bend was through New Atheism. So basically it was like the classic edgier arguments, which obviously a lot of those are silly now. And once I realized those were silly, I moved back towards like agnosticism. You know, I would hit people with the flying spaghetti monster stuff when I was a teenager and all that kind of crappier arguments. But I quickly moved away from that. So prior to that, you somehow believed God exists? Yep, I believed in the Christian definition of God, or pretty much anyone's definition, any monotheist's definition of God, which is going to be the ultimate foundation. And I was a hardcore fundamentalist by the book Christian, so I didn't believe in like Catholicism. I thought Catholics, and a lot of people in my family still think this. I get into arguments with them. They think Catholics aren't Christian at all, like they have nothing to do with Christianity and they're all burning in hell or whatever. Like that's how like I was by the book, young earth creationist. I argued with my biology teacher on evolution. I argued with them about the earth having a beginning. Like, yeah, I was a hardcore Christian and moved away from that. surrounded myself with different types of people, some of them Catholic, some of them just agnostic or atheist, that challenged me, and I was like, okay, it's not as straightforward as I thought. And then, obviously I got a little bit more educated, so you obviously abandon young earth creationism and evolutionary denialism and all that crap. And then I was like, okay, but it still works within a Christian context, and then I even abandoned that eventually. But yeah, and then I went to agnostic, and I even kind of was contemplating becoming religious again for a little while before becoming atheist. I was even going to become a Muslim at some point. So, yeah, I've been all over the place on religion, but I see. Fair enough, bro. Yeah. Hey, what's up, St. Jess? Welcome back. I see. Fair enough, bro. Yeah. Yeah, I kind of, I guess it's just like that journey of learning where, like, you learn enough. You, like, hit this precipice of confidence, and I hit that with religion, and I was like, oh, I can own any leftist, liberal, atheist, and then I fell back into the other side where I became this like arrogant new atheist type, and I was like, oh, I can own every Christian I come across, or God's a bunch of nonsense, zero rational explanation. And then I think I reached a point of like, oh, I think I have a sophisticated understanding of this. And then once I reached that, I was actually even contemplating becoming religious again at that point, but I've walked through a lot of the arguments and landed on an atheism. So, like, I think ultimate foundation to me means literally foundation of all real things, and I just think some real things lack a foundation, so therefore I'm not a monotheist of any kind. So, yep, kind of long journey, but, I went through basically any belief you could hold except for like a pantheonic religion. I've probably held it. So, I've went through a pretty wild journey. Just the way my mind works. I love learning new stuff, so for some reason religion just caught my attention, and I just studied the crap out of it. And yeah, and then I just ended up an atheist, I guess. I suppose it's possible to change back to a theist again, but there's some pretty critical issues that I think need answered, so yeah, not a big fan of theism at the moment. But they certainly have a few tricky arguments, so I'm certainly in a position where, like, I have a more sophisticated view now. I'm not just some, like, new atheist shit on people for the sake of shitting on them anymore. It's more like, there's something going on here, let's figure it out, and let's talk it out. I think there's no God. If you think there is, let's, So right now, you no longer believe in the Bible 100%? Yeah, I guess it depends on what you mean by believe. I would say there's nothing supernatural explained in the Bible. I would have just different interpretations of the Bible. So like the Torah, or the first 5 books are God's word, I think are just simply oral tradition. They're not like literal, or if there was anything literal there, it's so far removed from the original teaching that you really can't gather much from it. You could kind of gather what people thought God was, is the best you could get from the Torah. And then from the prophets, so the major prophets, Elijah, Isaiah, and Thomas, and then a couple of the minor prophets I've studied, like Hosea and Amos. I think that people were trying to say that they like were truly predicting stuff. they were mostly talking to the Israelites. So, like, when you see all the crap you see online of people like, oh, this is a sign of the end times, and they always turn out to be wrong, is because they think those prophets were somehow prophesizing to us right now. They were just talking to Israelites at the time, so they were basically just giving a view of like why all the crappy stuff was happening to them. They're basically like, see, you've misbehaved and you didn't listen, so God's punishing you. Have bad God's chosen people is basically what the prophets were doing. They were basically looking for a way to blame blame the Israelites for their losses. And then also I think Amos was kind of explaining the same thing. They're basically like, oh, you Israelites misbehaved, so now we're conquered. And then the New Testament, I think Jesus existed. I don't think he was actually supernatural, or at least I have no reason to suspect that. But yeah, Jesus existed. So, if you once believed in a God, do you have some abstract concept or principle you put in his place, like truth, love, goodness, logic, randomness? No. I think that there just simply is no ultimate foundation to the universe. Just different things have different foundations. So, kind of in a sense, instead of my explanation landing on something just being God, I kind of just replace it one by one or item by item. So, like when it comes to time, instead of just being like, oh, God created time, now I would say time is just eternal or has just always existed. So there's no ultimate foundation for that. Same thing for energy. Instead of being like, oh, God made energy or there's a foundation for that, I just simply go, there is no foundation for energy, it just exists. So on and so forth. So basically, I haven't necessarily put anything in place of God. I just don't think there is an ultimate foundation of reality. I think different parts of reality have different foundations. I think trying to be a universalist or trying to find a singular thing that is the foundation of all of reality, I think is a moot effort. I don't think such thing exists. And even if it did, I have no clue what it would even be. If I had to try to guess at this time, it would probably be the wave function. Like all infinites just collapse to the wave function. And we're starting to get a little bit of evidence for that. Like some people are believing you can represent entropy as a wave, which in turn means that maybe you could think of all randomness or all things as a wave, because all things gain entropy over time. So even time itself will gain entropy. So if you could represent it like a wave, if you go back far enough, it makes sense that it would just collapse to a wave to me. So I guess if someone asked me, you know, okay, you have to believe that there's an ultimate foundation of reality, what do you think it is? I would probably just say wave function, probably. But I don't think there even is one. I think just all things have different foundations. Some always exist, some have foundations. And those foundations are just inevitably things that are eternal. Interesting, you talk about waves. Yeah. I don't know. That's my thought. So if I had to pick an ultimate foundation, it'd probably be the wave function. I don't know. I think a good physicist or good, like, person that studied any of these things enough is just going to tell you, like, I just remain agnostic for now on if there is, like, a ultimate foundation. Like, I tend to lean towards there just is none, period, but there could be. It's just certainly not personal in nature, which would turn down pretty much any traditional belief of God or anything. It's probably just the wave function. Like, I would guess if you zoomed in on an infinite mathematical limit, if you got close enough, it would probably just collapse to a wave. Hey, what's up, Elijah? Where are you from? I'm from the United States in good old Ohio. Good old Ohio. Let's go Buckeyes. I came across this quote. Pythagoras provided a glimpse of the answer 2,500 years ago when he declared all things are numbers. Mathematics built from numbers is not an abstraction, but is ontological. It actually exists. Numbers are real things. Specifically, they are frequencies of energy waves. Yeah, I kind of am moved towards this. Like, I'm kind of thinking I might be a Platonist in the sense that, like, numbers and stuff are real, but I think certainly they're transcendental. For something to be able to exist, it has to be quantifiable within mathematics. Are you a gamer? Yeah, I play a decent chunk of video games. I haven't been as much lately just because, like, I just don't have time between work, streaming, reading, playing music. Now I'm trying to develop some video games again and program a little. So I just have too many hobbies to actually play video games. I'm trying to make some games and, you know, program again. The quote goes on, mathematics is the only answer to everything. Mathematics is a subject inherently about eternal Platonic truth. What do you mean by LGBTQ plus? Is God too far? Yeah, I've been watching, I think there's just quite a bit of absurdity. I think people are a little bit too afraid to just bite the bullet and admit that the gay community engages in a lot of, like, I guess just unvirtuous or bad behavior or, like, self-harming behavior, and so they end up with higher rates of diseases and such. And probably it would be better as a society to encourage everyone equally to just be a little bit more cautious with sexual behavior and generally discourage, I guess, deviant behavior. I know deviant carries moral weight, but I guess I view it from a moral realist perspective, and most of the debates I see with LGBTQ people against Christians, they just kind of get slaughtered because they can't admit basic stuff. Like, if a Christian brings up, oh, there's higher rates of rectal cancer, like 2,000x, like or 2,000%, like way higher rates. We can't just be like, oh yeah, that's because, you know, the gay community is engaging in quite a bit of, like, polyamory and just sleeping around and stuff like that. That's just not the best behavior for even, like, a straight person, so them doing it is putting themselves at risk. And, like, there definitely needs to be much more caution and conversations with doctors and making sure that we're being safe as a society and discouraging this behavior. I don't think it should be illegal or anything, just I think we need to be able to have a conversation. Like, I think the anti-realist crap has just gone too far. The Western queer community is a little debaucherous. I'm assuming. Yeah, I think that I don't know. I think that we just need to have a moral realist perspective instead of an anti-realist perspective. Because I think also I've seen in debates, like, we struggle, all the reasonings given to support, like, being gay or anything are usually not consistent, so there's usually a defeater. Mostly because we're coming at it from an anti-realist perspective. I think we need to start viewing it from, like, a virtue ethics standpoint where we ought not just give in to base desires. So you shouldn't just sleep around for the sake of sleeping around. You shouldn't do things just for the sake of doing them. Because if you just buy, oh, everyone gets to do what they want, and we'll just be the ultimate libertarian society when it comes to social behavior, it just, things get wacky. We end up in the situation where we are, where you would struggle to say why, like, bestiality is wrong, because you could say, oh, it's because there's no consent present, and it's like, well, there's no agent present at all, so, and there's also no consent present to, like, slaughtering an animal and eating it, and yet we permit that. So, like, you just struggle. Like, you need to have a consistent worldview. And I don't know, I think people have, which I get it, I think people are taking the LGBTQ stuff personally, and I get it because there's been a lot of oppression against them. But we can't just start, like, anyone could literally doing whatever. Trying to compare bestiality to being gay is extremely extreme. Hey, what's up, Reclusi? Well, it's not that you're comparing that act to being gay. It's you're just testing the standard, right? Which is what you're going to do in normative ethics. So, like, if you're going to say all that matters is consent, you can't hold that and also believe bestiality is wrong. So essentially you can't, like, so if you just say you just need consent and that's all you need, animals just literally can't give consent, which also would mean that you wouldn't be able to be eating animals anymore. You would have to fully commit to being a vegan. And you would also have to commit to, we can't have police dogs anymore because dogs can't consent to being put in danger. You would have to say all these things have to go, and obviously that's absurd. Animals can't give consent. Yeah, that's the argument, but the issue is they can't consent to being police dogs. They can't consent to being pets. They can't consent to being eaten. They can't be consented, or they can't consent to being hunted. So if you really care about consent, you would have to become the ultimate vegan. And, like, you can't keep animals as pets, you can't eat them, and you can't use them to do work for you anymore. Which obviously society drastically changes. Now, maybe if you're a vegan, you could bite this bullet, but man, even some vegans keep pets and stuff, so it just seems absurd to me. You would have to have a consistent principle there, so it'd have to be something other than consent. I'm a vegan and have no pets. Yeah, you might be like the one person that could stay true to that argument. Sorry, how do you interpret the Bible on your own words? How do you interpret it on your own words? Well, you have to interpret it on your own words. I guess you just kind of think as you read. I assume you mean how do I interpret it? That's a long conversation. I think the Torah is just misinterpreted. Oral tradition, the prophets were strictly speaking to the Israelites to get them ready to fight back against the atrocities that happened to them. And I think the New Testament is just people believe Jesus was a cool dude, and he was such a influential guy, they ended up believing he was God. Okay, so what is the criteria for those that are straight? Consent and also being opposite genders? In that case, I could use your exact argument against you here. So that's not the argument I would give. The really sophisticated argument that's going to be presented, there's two options. You could either give like a atheist response, which is going to be a virtue response, or you could give the Christian response. The Christian response is going to be goodness is like a transcendental property founded by God, and being gay or any sort of sexual misconduct is disorder or breaks how something ought to be. So in virtue of you doing something that you ought not do, you're creating chaos, and so you shouldn't do that. And then from a virtue ethics perspective, the argument, it's not just being gay. The atheist argument's going to say to you, it's bad to just do things for the sake of doing them. It's a violation of the virtue courage. It's basically just like, oh, I did this just because I felt like doing it. Which we as a society ought not do, and you as an individual owe it to yourself to not do that. So basically, like, you shouldn't just have sex for the sake of being, just for the sake of having sex. So you should be having sex because you're building a relationship with a partner. You're trying to have like a long-term relationship. Just, you should have genuine, justifiable reasons to do it that don't violate other virtues. So if you ever have a contradiction present, it's going to be a bad thing to do for yourself. And then as a society, we obviously don't want to have people harming themselves, basically. Do you think being queer is inherently unmoral? No, I don't find anything innately immoral about just simply being like gay or bisexual or something. I think engaging in sexual immorality is immoral. I think it's less virtuous than not doing that, so in turn it's less good than not doing it. Fair, but you are also assuming that gay people have sex just because they want to. Two men can be married, be guided by a rational soul, and have sex. It is no different from a heterosexual relationship. Again, this is an argument against irresponsible sex. Yep, and that's the point I'm making. Space Shuttle, what's up? Hey, mortals, the philosophy tag attracted me. Yeah, that's the argument I'm making, which would be your response to a religious person. And that's the argument I'm making, that the classic response is given, that it's just consent, or it's just people have the freedom to do what they want, doesn't work. If you take it from a virtue ethics perspective, you should genuinely engage in just good sexual practices. It's better for you, and not doing that is worse for you. And as a society, we should discourage things that are worse for people. So, but it would certainly mean pushing back against some things of the gay community, kink at Pride, stuff like that. You would have to be able to like clearly say, no, we don't believe in this. Otherwise, you're going to be contradicting yourself, and you're going to be making the religious people or whoever you're arguing against be like, this person's insane. So, always come for philosophy. What I find is mostly stupid video games and anime squirrel avatars. I like your channel. Yeah, that's probably going to be a majority of the philosophy stuff, especially on Twitch. I don't care much when a male marries another male, same with female. Yeah, I don't either. I think the absurdity just comes from people unable to bite bullets in conversations. Like, I watched an argument between a religious apologist and a quote-unquote gaytheist. There's like this new atheist movement called the Gaytheist movement. There's just like a couple members of them on TikTok. They're basically gay atheists. And there was one of them having a chat with Trent Horn, who's like a really, really good Christian apologist. And he wouldn't just bite the bullet on like bestiality. He kept giving like this roundabout answer where like, we obviously all think that's wrong, and like, I think you should focus more on so and so, and couldn't just give a simple "this is why it's wrong." And I think if you look at a lot of the arguments given, they're just bad. Like, we can't just say that like being gay is fine because of consent, because consent doesn't hold for like bestiality, for instance. Because like animals don't consent to getting eaten, and animals don't consent to being used for work. So maybe you're just not a fan of sex culture in the West, not the LGBTQIA plus community, because many straight people commit the things you hate. Hate, I wouldn't use the word hate. I would just simply say they're factually unvirtuous or immoral. And yeah, certainly straight people engage in it as well. It just seems to be uniquely happening in the gay community. And like, advocates of the gay community can't just simply, because most of them are moral anti-realists, they can't give a valid argument for why they're doing the things that they're doing. And like things like kink at pride and stuff like that, there's people that unironically defend these things, and I think they're just silly. Again, what is the argument against being gay? If you want to go the Christian angle, I ask for an argument for God. I'm an atheist, so I wouldn't argue that. I don't think there's an argument against being gay. And I think even a Christian would agree that they aren't arguing that it's wrong to be gay. They're arguing the sexual immorality is wrong. But then you're positing something you can't defend. I'm not positing that there's something wrong with being gay. I'm just simply saying a lot of the stuff has gone too far and it's absurd. Kink at pride is ridiculous. Obviously the drag shows to kids, stuff like that, these are all obviously silly. Like, yeah, we should be able to say, like, this stuff's stupid. That's what I'm positing. I wouldn't say that just simply being gay is a problem. I don't think even most Christians would say that. They would say that the sexual immorality is where the immoral act happens, not simply being gay. Because a Christian is going to argue to you here that, oh, it creates disorder, and disorder is bad. So they're arguing against the disorder, not just being gay. Same thing, I wouldn't say being gay is a problem. Is the streamer pro or contra LGBTQ? The current community, like, I'm kind of neutral to it. I think it's kind of weird to just, like, do some of the things that they do with the, like, kink at pride and stuff and all that. So, and there's unironically, like, some really wacky beliefs out there. A lot of them can't denounce bestiality, so a lot of the philosophers are literally, like, being like, yep, yeah, bestiality is morally good, or it's morally neutral. So that's just kind of wacky. Yeah, if we're getting to that point, I would probably be like, okay, this community is a little bit wild. We need to have a conversation here. Also, if you're saying that, why are gay men in America have the lowest divorce rates, being just 28%? I'm not against gay people getting married. I think if there's going to be a legal concept of marriage, it has to be available to everyone. That's just definitionally the case. I, for myself, despise every form of shared ideology, and I don't care much if it is a Nazi ideology or LGBTQ plus ideology or whatever. Yeah, it starts to get kind of wacky. So the events that has been prophesied in the Bible, like in Matthew 24, 7-8, what is happening right now, even before, no longer makes you believe God exists. Those prophecies were not prophesizing today at all. Those prophets were talking to the Israelites. If you're one of the people that think that like they're talking to us today, I think you're a little bit misinformed. I don't think any biblical scholar would agree with you. The prophets were talking to the Israelites and the people of their time. That's how come they didn't prophesize like cars and airplanes and the internet, right? They weren't actually prophesizing anything in the future. And it'd be weird to suggest that. That's how come it's always funny watching Christians be like, oh, we're so close to the end times. Look, the prophets were right. The prophets literally said nothing about this at all. That's just a weird interpretation of the Bible. So, no, the prophets were talking to the Israelites. They basically were telling them, like, stop doing what you're doing because you're the reason why we're losing the wars that we're in right now. And you're the reason why Judea and Israel are getting invaded by Egypt from the south and who would it have been? Fuck. The Mesopotamians from the north, I think. But yeah, it's just a weird reading of the Bible if you genuinely read the Old Testament and think that they're prophesizing something for you now as the reader. They weren't talking to us at all. Clearly, because nothing they've said has happened to us now. Now, you could argue they were talking about a prophetic view of suffering, and you could try to defend the prophetic view of suffering, but that's a disgusting view. And if you hold that view, I think that you would... God is definitely not all good. He's a sadistic fuckhead. Like, if God causes earthquakes and stuff just because there's sinners in society, then God's a shithead. Like, one of the first things you should do if God is real and you meet him is give him the old 1-2 combo straight to the dome piece. Before he sends you to hell, because fuck that guy. So, obviously the prophets were just talking to Israelites and God's chosen people. Otangelo Grosso, thanks for the subscription. What if Batman is real too? I don't know. Go give him a fist bump. Don't steal from don't steal from your local grocery store or anything, or forget to scan something, because he might show up and punch you in the face for stealing a Snickers. So be wary if Batman's real. Make a decision, man. Do you believe or do you not believe? I do believe in the Batman. He's saving our souls. One beat up bad guy in an alley at a time. But yeah, I think that the prophets, Revanova, how's it going? What's going on here? Just chatting. Anyone that disagrees can feel free to let me know. All my beliefs are in the description. But yeah, I think the prophetic view of suffering was very, very bad. I think trying to pretend that they were talking to us at all is silly. I think it's indefensible. I think they were literally just saying, like, babies getting bashed against rocks by the Egyptians was because God said so, which I think is a pretty shitty God to believe in. So I think using the prophets to justify, like, modern day anything is silly. Not caring about Nazi ideology, whether others hold such ideology, is an insane and dangerous claim. Sure, I disagree. Yep. Do you think that kink at Pride is a good thing? I think that's abhorrent and indefensible, but I shouldn't even use such moralistic language. It's just unvirtuous. What pride? Yeah, most major, like, city pride events. So, like, Pride Columbus, for instance. So they allowed, like, a few local kink and leather groups into the parade. Did you say Kit Kat Pride? No, Columbus Pride. That's just one I know of because it's in my area and it's one of the biggest in the Midwest. So that's an example. I think that was abhorrent. Well, that's too moralistic. It's just unvirtuous, and we ought not be associating with it or defending it. Hate to be a debate lord, but it's very odd to defend gun laws in America as they stand, but be outraged about drag shows. The occurrence of said drag shows are statistically negligible, whereas most kids in America that die due to gun violence. Also, what is kink at Pride, if you could expand on that? What's Columbus Pride? Yeah, kink at Pride, people are defending, like, the leather community, the, like, pup play community. Like, there's people that come out in, like, chaps and, like, basically naked that participate in pride parades. And it's been a debate for a while, but they still are allowed into parades at pride events like Columbus 2026, 2024. 2025, 2024. Like, if you are walking downtown in any of these areas when Pride is going on, you will see in the parade basically a kink community participating. And I think that's a bad thing. We shouldn't be associating with that. That's an example of going too far. Every ideology sucks, and those who promise liberation are the worst. Well, it doesn't have anything to do with sexuality. It's definitionally does with sexuality, but... So I don't see what it's got to do with LGBT. I don't either. That's why it's weird to me that LGBTQ activists advocate for it. It's odd to me. So, it sounds like we kind of agree that we shouldn't allow kink at Pride. So I'm cool with that. Do many activists advocate for it? There's a handful. Like, if you look at, like, some far left people, I think, like, a couple of the, like, anarchist communist types typically will defend it, like Vosh and them, like, though that type of community will usually defend it, but I don't know if it's, like, a standard position. I know that it's going to be probably most of like your anarcho-communist types are going to defend that position, which I think is absurd. I think there's a couple major like philosophers that unironically they at least won't denounce it, or they won't give a straight answer on it, which I think is the annoying part. Like a couple of the Atheists, which is like a new atheist movement on TikTok, those guys won't denounce it, and they're kind of becoming the most influential like atheist people right now, which I think that's a serious problem. So it's certainly present in like academia and philosophy that like post-structuralists and stuff defend it, or at least they won't directly deny it or be like, we shouldn't do that. I haven't heard of anyone wanting that incorporated in LGBT advocacy, I must say. Well, we keep allowing them at Pride events, so at least the Pride organizers aren't stopping them from being involved, which is very odd to me. So I think it's something, like, if you ever have brought up to, like, it's certainly something we should just be like, yes, this is bad. You shouldn't be publicly, like, displaying kink type stuff. It's just weird, and it's not what society ought to do. So that's just an example, but yeah, I think it also just some of the behaviors aren't good either. And it seems like we're not willing to say that like gay people need to behave a little bit more sexually responsibly. Just stuff like this. It seems like I see a lot of the people online are just witch behaviors. Yeah, I think engaging in like polyamory and non-committed relationships, adultery, all of that club type behavior, or like the nightclub type atmosphere, which is kind of baked into the gay culture, which, to be fair, a lot of it's left over from the underground era where it was illegal to be gay. So a lot of that behavior needs to be killed off. Kant didn't agree with being gay. I see. I was curious. Yeah, I think if you're a moral realist, you can't, like, I think saying gay, being gay in itself isn't an issue. I think Kant was wrong on that. But it's certainly like a lot of the behaviors are not good within the community, or they're certainly more pervasive. As I see it, there's nothing wrong with practicing it at all, and if everyone is adults, there's no problem. The problem is that the public space also contains children, and sexual kinks should be kept away from them until they're older. Okay, so at least we agree on that. What's wrong with polygamy? Polygamy is it's just more bad for you than participating in a more standard relationship. And it's unvirtuous, or it's a vice, right? This shows a lack of courage, that you're just giving in to base desires, just having sex for the sake of having sex. Just doing things for the sake of doing them is not good. It's unvirtuous, or a vice. You shouldn't do that. There are more straight people in poly relationships than gay people. That's factually false. Polyamory in gay community per capita. This is USA Today. 2% of heterosexual participants reported being in an open relationship, as opposed to 32% of gay participants, 22% of bisexual participants. So that's a factor of 10 to 15 times more common in the gay and bisexual community. I would need a citation for that. I'm pretty sure that's just factually false. Also, in a club, there's a lot more straight people than gay people. Per capita, I don't. That's also probably false, but I haven't researched that, so I guess I'm neutral. I would need a source. Again, if you have issues with behaviors, that's one thing. But you seem to be directing it to one group because it's more common in that group. It's a matter that straight people engage with even more. Total, not per capita. It occurs at a higher rate in the gay community. It's not. It is. I would need to see a source. Why is it worse? What's wrong with having sex for pleasure? Yep, it's just a unvirtuous act. You shouldn't instrumentalize people. It's not good for you. It's not good for your mental health. There's plenty of studies on mental health outcomes in these types of situations. They're not good. Men tend to get more violent, and women tend to have increased rates of mental illness. It's just tends to not work out well. Okay, that is a different research question. I said there are more by number. Oh, I don't care about by number. That's a useless claim. Of course, his relationship with Christianity is more complicated than many theists would like, but nevertheless, one of his goals was to reconcile rationality with his Christianity. Again, I did not consider it per capita. Yeah, I don't care about the total. Per capita means that being a part of that group makes you statistically more likely to engage in the behavior. That's what any researcher would be concerned with. Like, I don't care about total. Because if you want to do that, black people and white people, like, we could start getting into some race type arguments now. Like, obviously you wouldn't say this in like a race realist type debate. Like, obviously you need to be able to look at things per capita. Otherwise you're going to be accepting some fairly wild beliefs. So I don't really care about total numbers in any situation, especially for behavior. Because behavior of a population, right? The size of the population, right? You're going to have some populations smaller than others, so you need to be able to like look. If we're trying to see if a behavior is more common amongst that group of people, we need to be able to adjust for the size of the group. So I don't really care about total. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just a fact. Again, I would need to see a study or something that typically gay people are going to engage in these activities at a higher rate than straight people. But if your argument is just like overall, yeah, but that's not that important to me. That's not a good measure when we're talking about behavior, what creates good outcomes or bad outcomes. I could care less. Because it's the same thing. Even if, like, with the gun argument at that point, you wouldn't be able to make an argument against the gun argument, because if you're just looking at, like, totals of stuff, then gun crime suddenly falls super low. So you can't believe in, like, any sort of gun laws. Like, you start getting into all kinds of wacky stuff. Like, but yeah, my only argument, there's nothing wrong with being gay. I will state that. Nothing wrong with being bisexual. That's fine in itself. If you do something that's sexually immoral, it's definitionally sexually immoral. And we should hold the same standard to both straight people and gay people. That's my argument. So, I think both straight people and gay people should behave in better moral actions. We would be better off as a society. Trying to say he was a secret atheist is just unjustifiable. We're arguing about Kant being an atheist or Christian. I know that's debated a bit. It's hard to say, but he was certainly making atheistic arguments. Like, his moral perspective, I don't think required belief in God, but he himself may have been a Christian, but his categorical imperative, I don't think needed Christianity. I think that was his whole goal, was he set out to just use rationality was his goal. He would say his moral perspective required belief in God. I don't know if that's the case. Emmanuel, does the categorical imperative need? I don't know. Yeah, no, this looks definitionally false. I would need a quote from Kant to prove that, because I think his entire argument was that you could find the categorical imperative strictly through reason. Now, if you asked him where did reason come from, he may say God made reason, but he didn't say that the categorical imperative needed God. He said that he may have been Christian in the sense that he still believed in an ultimate foundation, but the whole point of his categorical imperative was that you didn't need God. Like, you just use rationality. Now, he may have given you a response if you asked him, where does rationality come from? He may have said, well, I think it comes from God. But his moral perspective itself does not need a belief in God. He even said that. It comes from rationality. Now, he may say rationality comes from God, but yeah, you can use the categorical imperative as an atheist. So, it's actually one of the few, like, atheist moral realism points. Okay, question. What is the moral argument against being in a poly relationship? Yeah, so I think the normative moral argument could be two parts. You could have a utility argument where it just produces worse outcomes for people, especially if children are produced in that relationship. And then from a virtue perspective, just having a bunch of partners for the sake of having a bunch of partners is not, it's a violation of courage virtue. It's not courageous to do that. It's instrumentalizing, which isn't good. It's a vice. You shouldn't do that. So there's a couple different perspectives from a normative perspective. But yeah, I would say overall it's going to produce worse outcomes for you. So you could just do a simple utility or outcome-based approach. You could also do intent, that it seems like you're going to innately have a bad intention there. Of like, how can a person possibly give the attention and value of a relationship, of like an actual romantic relationship, to a bunch of people? It seems unreasonable. So I think you can argue it from any of the normative standards, whether it's a duty to self, an outcome-based duty, or an intention to others-based duty. I think polyamory is tough to defend. You might be able to concoct a rare scenario, but I would have to hear the scenario and walk it through, because I highly doubt Maybe if you have like two like gay people that can't produce a kid, so there's not going to be like a kid hurt by it, and then they introduce like a third person, it starts to get really tricky. Like, maybe it could be good, but it still feels like it's a violation of courage. And you're probably not getting the full value of a romantic relationship from having multiple partners. But I would have to see the defeater scenario. Because I've tried to think of some and I just can't think of one. So I'm telling you what Kant thought, not what we think now. No, I dislike when Kant becomes the great reformer of Christianity. Man, that sucks badly. It is simply not true. Kant philosophy made people strive for reason and think over stuff. It's not another Thomas von Aquin. Thomas von Aquin. Yeah, I think Kant would agree that his categorical imperative was strictly based on reason, but I don't know what his response would be to where did reason come from. But it certainly wasn't like a Christian exclusive thing. And I don't even know if Kant thought that his belief was like a Christian exclusive thing. I think he said that it was just a reason-dependent thing. Which I think I would kind of hold some degree of Kantian ethics. Like, I think a lot of modern moral realism stems from Kant. And arguably before Kant, like with virtue ethics, but yeah, I don't know. That's yeah, I don't think I think, yeah, you just got to kind of think through some of the, like, and it's an imperative, friends. That means it's an order. It's said that every smart being in existence have to follow it for the purpose of survival, even aliens a million light years ago. Yep, it's kind of the belief I would hold. I think there's two ways to solve the is-ought problem, or, like, come up with moral realism. You could either stick to ises or all oughts. And I think Kant was trying to solve it through all oughts. And I think it was a very good solution. And it's basically similar to the virtue ethics, which existed around antiquity. And right, I mean, it's basically there's a universal ought that we all just simply have, and there's no way around it. Any rational agent is going to possess it. So you're just going to do it because there is an ought for every single person to build off of. So that was his idea, and I think it's a very good idea. I tend to be in the same camp. Hence, the end is no more than an idea of an object that contains and unites the formal condition of all the ends that we ought to have, and whatever is in harmony with duty and all the ends that we do have, that is, contains and unites. Duty, happiness, in proportion as one is obedient to duty, i.e. the idea of the highest good of the world. For the possibility of this, we must postulate a higher moral, most holy, an omnipotent being, the only thing that could unite to two elements of this highest good.
Console.
I think there are very solid grounds to argue that Kant is not a moral realist in the first place, which is not a critique against Kantian ethics itself, but rather that he is moral realist, or the foundation for contemporary moral realism. Yeah, I wouldn't say that he's the foundation. I think probably Aristotle was, probably, and like Plato, with their ideas of the categorical imperative. They just kind of called it virtue ethics, which it's a bit different, but I think they were getting to moral realism before that with eudaimonia, or the good life. So I don't know if Kant is like the father of it, but the term virtue ethics is from the 20th century. Maybe the term, but ancient Greek philosophers held virtue ethics or virtue ethic type positions. I don't know what that means. The categorical imperative and virtue ethics are vastly different. Rationality is present in both, but they are different. And again, Kant is a constructivist, not a moral realist. Anyways, I'm done debating for today. Okay. Well, thanks for coming out. Yep, they're different. Virtue ethics is more like duty to self or the good life, and Kant is more of like a call to action to others, I guess. So there is a bit of a difference. Like one is like principle based, one is like self based, I guess. But virtue ethics is informed by a selective reading of Aristotle, which is fine. Yeah, I think they were just simply describing a type of virtue ethics. They were basically describing there was eudaimonia, which is something that everyone has. Like everyone has a universal like ought, or like everyone ought live the good life, or everyone ought reach eudaimonia, or everyone is trying to reach eudaimonia. And he kind of built from there. I disagree with this. Aristotle is a virtue ethicist, but not the first. She popularized it. She may have popularized it, but I would say modern versions of virtue ethics she did. But certainly we had a concept of like a universal like good life coming from ancient Greece, but Plato is dominantly the father of virtue ethics. Fair. Yeah, I think generally I don't know. I always don't get when people build up relationships with God and morals somehow. Yeah. Bamsy the Circle. Hey, how's it going? Clown Zone? Whatever that means. But welcome to the Clown Zone, I guess. Yeah, I don't think it's possible to build a relationship between God and morals. I think it's runs face first into the is-ought problem every time. But I don't think you could be a moral realist and believe in God. The Bible is? The Bible is what? But yeah, I don't think it's possible to be a moral realist unless you're like the ultimate Calvinist and you just reject agency altogether. But you certainly can't be like, you certainly can't believe agency exists. You certainly can't believe in free will and um, and believe God is the foundation of ethics. It's a bad meta-ethical position. I think it would have to be all is, which I think removes thought process or agency from the matter. The problem of eudaimonia and Aristotle's virtues was that there was an inherent incompatibility. His virtues were only ever supposed to be achievable by free men, and in fact only fully by rich men, yet he didn't think through others pursuing their own eudaimonia in ways which might conflict with the way he saw rich men achieving eudaimonia through full fulfillment of his virtues. I don't know. I think yeah, I mean that might be a little bit of a problem. I don't know. But yeah, anyway, I think that you can't be... It's actually one of my arguments against the existence of God, is that you can't be a moral realist and believe in God. I don't think it's possible. But how? Yep, because I think you would have... Well, you could, but you would have to be like a Calvinist. So you would have to basically commit and basically say... human behavior just is good or it is not good, and then you could just ask, well, why ought I care? And then your answer has to be, well, it just is going to be the case. So there is no ought there, which implies that you don't get a choice in the matter, so there's no like agency or free will present. So like the only way to resolve the is-ought problem is going to be just say that God literally makes every single thing that happens ever. He's like the source of it all, which means every rapist is God's decision, every murderer is God's decision. Like, and if that's the case, we're certainly not agents. We're just pawns of God. God makes you like a murderer or a rapist, and so there's no reason you ought to do anything. Like if you stumble upon a drowning child, either God is going to save him or he is not. There's no like ought involved. Like I shouldn't ought to help that kid. Why couldn't you take the sort of position that God gave free will and God perfectly knows what is good, but is not per se the source of good? Yep, because I would say that if you attempt to justify like on the ought end that like we have free will, I can just ultimately ask you the question, why ought I listen to God? So if God knows what is good, like, I don't know. I don't even know what that word would mean at that point. Like I could just always ask the question, why ought I listen to what God says? I just answered why, because he knows what is good. Yep, but then I could just go ahead and say, I don't care what you say is good. Or you're just going to run into the Euthyphro problem. It's going to be like, if God knows what is good, does he know it because there's some sort of goodness outside of himself? Or is it good simply because he knows that it's good? And if there's some goodness that lies outside of himself, I'm just going to be like, well, why ought I listen to you? I could figure it out for myself. And if he just arbitrarily makes what is good, then we're back to the problem where it's just subjective, right? It's not moral realism. But the account I gave is one answer to the Euthyphro dilemma. Please reread. Why couldn't you take the sort of position that God gave free will? God perfectly knows what is good, but is not per se the source of good. I mean, you could say that. Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. My bad. I misread that. So that is an answer. So it's just like good lies somewhere else. Yeah, then there's no reason I ought listen to God because I just know what is good myself, or there's some way I can find it. So there's still like a why ought I listen to what you're saying? There's no like guarantee for me to do it. And it certainly means that God's not all powerful or like morality's eternal. It's like something God never created. It's just kind of there. Which certainly makes him not the foundation of something, which means it's kind of hard to say he's the ultimate foundation. So it kind of definitionally disproves God. So we're kind of back to the original problem. But you ought listen to God because he knows perfectly. Just like if you had a really wise friend, you might be able to figure it out for yourself or not. But either way, why not rely on an infallible tutor? But my question is just going to be, why ought I? Like, if it's just because he knows, well, it's clearly out there. I could just think of it myself. You ought because he is infallible. Yeah, I mean, I guess I just don't really, I could still be like, okay, I just don't care. I guess what stops me from just going like, I don't care? Or I decided to not listen. Look, I don't agree with this position, but your counter arguments suck. Yeah, what would your counter argument be? Because I feel like there's still no answer to why ought I listen to God present there. Like, what if I say, okay, God is all good, I just don't care? Like, what makes me still listen? Like, what's the response? Like, if I'm just like, yep, don't care, thought about it, don't care. Like, what's the response? Is it just like, I don't know. Like, if there's a better response, I'd like to hear it. Because I don't know. Every time I've looked into this, that's the response people give. I don't know what a better response is. Because, like, Trent Horn uses this argument all the time. And that's his usual, like, the best responses I've seen to him have just been like, I don't care. Or like, why ought I? And his response just seems to be, well, why ought you not? So now we're just in a circle of like, why ought I? Why ought I? What's the resolution to that? I'd argue that we clearly do not have infallible knowledge that God exists, let alone what his advice actually is. Using reason, we are less likely to end up believing moral falsehoods than if we rely on a highly suspect belief in God and his commandments. Oh, so your response is to just change the topic, though. Now you're just going to argue, well, I don't believe God exists. That's not really answering it. The question of why ought I listen to God, you're just kind of changing it to, well, I don't think God exists, or I don't have good reason to think that God exists. So your response has changed the topic. Which I think a Christian like a Trent Horn or something is just going to be like, okay, well, at least we agree if God does exist, you're going to listen to him, right? And now you've just been gotcha'd, I guess. You've just retreated off the topic. So that doesn't sound like a response to me. That sounds like changing the topic of... Because this topic's usually going to start, people are going to accuse you, like, oh, you can't have moral realism and not believe in God. And if you're like, well, I think we can have moral realism, they're going to be like, you're going to get to this point ultimately, and they're going to be like, well, even the moral realism you gave, if God just knows it, why shouldn't you just listen to him? You need a response to that. If your response is just change the topic, then that seems unsatisfying to me. if God existed and I knew he was speaking to me, I sure as fuck would listen. So you have to rephrase the question. I don't think it's a gotcha at all. I think that's just retreating from the topic, though. I don't know. It sounds like the gotcha worked, though. I think that is a gotcha at that point. I think you just concede that the Christian's correct. I guess. That if God exists, then morality is grounded in him, I guess. Or, like, I don't know, it feels like just a concession. Like you just move on, but I don't know, that feels unsatisfying to me. That doesn't seem intuitively correct. Like, this is the type of response. Like, I feel like you have two options. You either commit to anti-realism and you just say that, like, oh, I reject morality's existence, period, and try to prove that, or I don't know. My mind is mine alone. When I would hear another guy in it suddenly, I'm gonna need to do something. That is private space that I'm not willing to shield. I concede that if God exists and is infallible and knows all moral truths, that we should listen to him. How could you possibly not concede that? I don't know. I guess it's just circular. Like, we should listen to him because we should listen to him. I don't know. It's not circular. Okay, why should I care if someone's infallible or not? Like why ought I care? Conceding a point does not make one a theist. I cannot take truth from others that's tasteless and doesn't pay toll to the suffering I have endured. I need to find out myself. Yeah, I guess there's still just an unanswered question here. Like, if I concede, like, for the sake of the argument, God exists and all that, there's still a question, why ought I care or why ought I listen? If you know someone is infallible and fully honest, then you know anything they say is true. Well, I guess I just would never concede the infallible thing then, I guess. Or I would argue that. Yeah, maybe. I don't know, I'd have to think about it more. If you don't concede the infallible thing, then you are making exactly the same move as I just did. Well, yeah, maybe. Okay. So essentially, like, I could retreat. It's not even exactly retreating. We're still staying on topic. I could be like, so like, if they say these premises need to be true. So like, the syllogism is basically like, premise 1, God is infallible. Premise 2 is infallible. All people ought listen to infallible things. Therefore, you ought listen to God. I guess you just argue on the premise that God is infallible. Okay. I guess I just haven't thought of it in terms of a syllogism before. I could see this now. Then you're not conceding the point. You're staying on the topic. You're just arguing it's literally impossible for God to be infallible, I guess. Or you just reject that we have no reason to think that to be the case. Okay. I'll have to think that through a little bit more, but yeah. I think that is a valid thing then. Then you're not retreating, you're staying on the topic. You're just arguing one of the premises that they gave you. So, like, if the Christian goes, you know, they have their syllogism, you just fight one of the premises of the syllogism. So you're still staying on the topic. So, okay, that kind of makes sense to me. Actually, really appreciate that. So, nah, you need to destroy the fully honest. They're to unnatural, chaotic, destructive good, to unhuman, to give human advices. Yeah, now that I think about it, I think that's fair because you're still staying on their syllogism. So I guess I was just thinking about it wrong. And I guess I just haven't seen people, like, use that argumentation. Like, that's the issues, right? Most of the people argue from, like, an anti-realist perspective, or they're just, like, they start off by just denying morality altogether, I guess. So I guess I never got to see that argued. So that kind of makes sense to me. So I'm glad we agree, but I don't think you should think so much in terms of retreating and such. Philosophy shouldn't be a fight. Try instead to find cohesive, consistent positions, but that's a point of style. Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like, I thought it was like, when I used the term retreat there, I thought it was like completely leaving the premise altogether, I guess, is how I thought of it. But I think you just made me realize that there is, like, a premise there to still fight. You haven't changed to, like, a new set of premises, I guess. I guess I just didn't think of it like that. It was, yeah. No, philosophy is a conflict in a battlefield, man. Better sharpen your weapons. Sometimes it could turn into a battlefield. I mean, I think I could, if people get into a rhetorical screaming match, I think I'm a fairly calm person, and they're going to look silly, but that's not the main goal here, is not to, like, yell people down and get into a fight. Although there's nothing wrong with that if that's the style. It's just like, I could do both, right? I live in a household where people could get loud and fight and argue. Like, I could do both, but I guess that's the thing. I guess I wasn't thinking of it. So yeah, I could actually make note of this. So, like, truth always hurts bad, so philosophers love to torture each other. Yeah, I guess that's the thing, is, like, people become, like, I don't know, super, like, their identity becomes what they believe, so, like, yeah, it just becomes, like, sport or fighting, basically. Which I'm not fully against, right? There's a type of person that does that. And again, probably when I was younger, I would have, like, fully treated philosophy as just, like, a full-on fight all the time. I don't know. I could do it either way, but this new perspective, I like this, because it's basically like their premise. You're still staying within their premise. You're just attacking one of the propositions. So, because certainly, like, you would have to demonstrate or give a defense of the infallible premise-y. Like, there's certainly a positive argument being made by the Christian there, or, like, any religious person there. So you're still staying within the bounds of the argument. Anyway, on the topic of LGBT issues, I worry that you're utilizing a lot of empirical claims, such as being in a polyamorous relationship is always bad for mental health. Those empirical claims need scientific support. Yeah, I have a research document. I think it's in the Discord if you join it. If it's not there, I need to add it, but I could go through and re-research again, because maybe the data's changed, but when I used to look at any sort of, like, sexual acts, like, the consensus, like, there was certainly the majority of the data pointed to a lot of, like, sexual misconduct leading to, like, women having worse mental health outcomes and men becoming more aggressive. But if the data's changed, I could change my opinion. A lot of it is empirical. There is a little bit of principle-based stuff in there, too, of just, like, you shouldn't do stuff for the sake of doing it, but I don't think that's enough in itself. I think it's necessary but not sufficient. I could certainly go back through the research document and update. Maybe the research has changed. Yeah. Do I have a research document still? It didn't get deleted, did it? LGBT, transgender stuff. And we should be also aware that if a study finds polyamory is bad for mental health on average, then it isn't necessarily bad for everyone, which means there are maybe couples where it's fine, which means you don't have an argument against those people if you're relying on those empirical claims. I think you could still argue that, like, it's not something that should be encouraged. I think you would struggle to argue that, like, people should be, like, imprisoned for it. Like, I don't think people should be put in prison. I think it should just be discouraged. Like, if it doesn't work in majority of cases, it's not a good thing for the average person to do. For example, my grand uncle is gay and engages in a fair amount of polygamy, but he's very happy, as is his partner, and they are some of the nicest and most ethically loving people I've ever met. Yeah, I mean, we could do an update through the research. Hey, what's up, God of Pig? How's it going? Welcome to the stream. Welcome in. So we need to make a new updated document because the old one is outdated. LGBTQ research stuff. So yeah, I think we could look back through it again. I believe anyone could be whatever they want to be until they are affecting other people. Oh, well, that's obviously not true. Do you think that bestiality is wrong? Bestiality is not affecting anyone else. A what? Do you think that bestiality is wrong? If you think that people should be able to do whatever they want, as long as it doesn't hurt someone else? Furthermore, someone inclined to polyamory may be more unhappy if they force themselves to not do so. We're going to have to research this again, because that also seems like outcomes of people in polyamorous relationships. What does that mean? Well, I guess we don't, having sex with animals. Do you think that's wrong? Yeah. Why? There's no person getting hurt by that. Let's start with meta-analysis. Ah, fuck, I misspelled that. Whatever. Yeah, can you tell me why bestiality is wrong? Why do you think it's wrong? Because I don't think you should do things for the sake of doing them. Number one, countering the monogamy superiority myth, a meta-analysis of the differentiation. Okay. Okay, I'm trying to do multiple things at once now. Yeah, so I would say bestiality is wrong because you shouldn't, like, instrumentalize things, or you shouldn't just do things for the sake of doing them. Animals are getting hurt, but no people are getting hurt. And also you could present an example where animals aren't getting hurt. Like if a woman, you know, I mean, it's going to get gross, but it's kind of the conversation. But if a woman lets a dog have sex with her, I mean, the dog's certainly not going to be in pain from that. Okay, but why specifically is bestiality wrong? Assume you receive significant pleasure from it. Yeah, I don't think you should do things simply because you receive pleasure from them. But they're getting hurt when we eat them. Yep. You shouldn't instrumentalize animals. Kant would say it's only people who shouldn't be instrumentalized. I don't think you should do it, period. So an example I'll give you is if you're walking, like if you see your kid picking up rocks as you're walking along and just chucking them against the ground for the sake of chucking them against the ground, eventually you're going to kind of be like, can you stop? Do something else, bud. Now, obviously, that's a really, really low example, but you could start building it up from there where it gets a little bit worse as you go up. Like, the intuition gets worse. So, like, if I go to, like, a plant and I just start ripping up grass for the sake of ripping up grass, same thing, I would look at the kid and kind of be like, why the hell are you doing that? Can you instrumentalize bacteria? Because that's what we need to do to create modern medicine. I think if the purpose is sufficient enough, you can eventually justify instrumentalization. But like, if a doctor just breeds bacteria for the sake of murdering them, or just like wiping them out with like spray, or like antibacterial spray, I would be like, why the hell are you doing that? Do something else. Where's the line? I don't know if I could draw the line specific enough to verbalize it, but I think it kind of relates back to intuition. Like, you know it when you see it. Like, it's like the line is the purpose sufficient enough to like be moving towards something broadly more productive? So like, if you're doing stuff for just the sake of doing it, there's more productive things you could be doing, which makes it less virtuous than the other things you could be doing. Do you eat chicken? Yeah, I'm not a vegan. Drawing a sufficient purpose line isn't very Kantian. In fact, there's no way to do so within his framework. I wouldn't really consider myself to be Kantian ethicist. Like, I wouldn't consider myself to be just strictly that. Sounds more like you want some form of consequentialism. No, it could be a type of consequentialism. Kind of. It's I don't know what the word for it would be. It's probably closer to virtue ethics, but like still different. I just think that there's duties to yourself that you just ought do. So you're instrumentalizing a chicken too? Yep, I would say that's a bad thing to do generally. And the only thing making it less bad is that you have an underlying need to eat, so at least you're satisfying like a need to some extent, but still just killing animals the way we do. It's certainly a wrong. Like if you could develop a society where we didn't have to slaughter animals, it would certainly be a more virtuous society. I would say it would be better, personally, but... So yeah, I would admit it's a little bit less virtuous to like slaughter chickens, cows. Like vegans have some authority to stand on there. Living by vibes ethics is, in my opinion, not very rational. We know intuitions are dramatically shaped by our culture. Yes, slaughter vegans. Amazing take. Okay, oh, okay, misread the room. No, I was actually giving praise to vegans, my bad. Vibes ethics is, in my opinion, not very rational. We know our intuitions are dramatically shaped by our culture. Yeah, but then if that's the case, you would have to be like, well, their bestiality is just simply not wrong. Which seems disgusting. I guess I would need to see a better response, right? Because other than like, okay, there's just like a built-in intuition that's just objectively there that guides us. Like, if there is none and you just adopt moral anti-realism, it feels like you just have to go like, oh, bestiality's not wrong. I don't know. What's culturally appropriate might not be morally appropriate. Yeah, like I don't know. It seems to me moral intuition goes beyond that, but I mean, looking at some of these women, plenty of men are basically practicing bestiality. Oof. It seems disgusting is exactly how many people object to homosexuality, but it's different than that. It's not that it seems gross, it's that it seems morally repugnant. Because, like, there's many things, like killing a spider, for instance. Like, spiders just gross us out. Like, we would still kill a spider. So it's beyond, like, disgust. Because there's some things that disgust us that we wouldn't, like, that's not that bad to like act on. Like, it seems more than that. That's why I use the term like instrumentalization. Like, there's something there where like just doing stuff for the sake of doing it just seems off to us. It's not just simply it's gross. It seems like you're just like doing something that humans ought not do. Like, it's kind of Kantian in that there's some type of imperative there that's like, it seems like there's some underlying ought. And the best word I could use for it is instrumentalization. Like, you shouldn't do it to anything, period. Like, you have to have very good justification to instrumentalize basically anything. And, like, the more, like, innate value the thing has, the, like, higher your burden of proof becomes. For e.g., in many cultures, they slaughter animals for pleasing their deity. Yeah, I would say that's absurd. How do you know your intuitions line up with moral reality? Do you have a reason, or is that simply an assumption? I think that it's probably an assumption. The reason is probably just it seems like there's things that throughout history we have just always found repugnant. And we still do today, but that's obviously not consistent. So it's probably like just like a assumed fact. Probably. I guess the reasoning would just be like, it just seems that there's certain things that are undeniable, I guess. Is it okay to base significant beliefs on assumptions which have no reason? No, I wouldn't say so. Like, I think there needs to be like an innate reason underlying it. I guess the reasoning just has to be consistency. If so, couldn't a theist just assume God exists? Well, that's not a moral question. That's a different question. That's asking, like, reality. Like, could I just assume, like, grass is red instead of green? Like, you could do that, but you would just simply be wrong. I guess when it comes to a moral thing, it's a little bit different. I guess the thing I would inevitably argue is that there's just like underlying facts of the matter that just seem contradictory, or they seem self-evident to me. So I guess if we're getting to like meta ethics, I guess like the argument I would give is just like it seems that ethics come from agency. Like, it seems like it's just self-evident that you ought value agents. And not doing so is contradictory. And so you could do that if you want. It's just going to be in a contradictory state. So similar to, like, if I assume, like, grass is red. I can, it's just wrong. Or it's just, there's, like, a fact of the matter that says it's wrong, I guess. Is it seems self-evident a good justification for any belief? Yeah. Yeah, if you can demonstrate that it's self-evident, I think that's a good justification. So, like, for example, if I take agency, like, attempting to prove agency isn't valuable, I would have to utter the phrase, you ought not value agency, which implies that all the people around me are valuing my agency to state that. And it's also, I'm clearly valuing my decision to not value the agency there. So it seems like I'm kind of speaking into existence that agency is valuable. So like if you can demonstrate something along those lines, I think that's acceptable justification. Is it seems self-evident a good justification for any belief? Not any belief. Like, if it's a non-moral belief, I wouldn't say so. Well, actually, no. It is a good justification. Like, if you could prove something self-evident, I think that's fine. If you could demonstrate something is self-evident, you have found a reason, which must be part of that demonstration. Yeah. Yeah, I would say if you could... Like, something is true if you demonstrate it's self-evidently true. Or, like, it eventually relates back to a self-evidently true thing. So, like, for instance, the not operator in logic is self-evidently existent, because to try to speak the not operator out of existence, you have to use the not operator. So, like, you would have to say the not operator does not exist. So what the hell does not mean there if not doesn't exist, right? So that's like an example. So like a moral example would be like the agent example. Like you ought value agency because by not doing so, you're demonstrating you value agency, or there's like a built-in claim that you ought value agency. So it seems like just like a self-evident moral fact. So yeah, I would kind of say that's how I justify true things. Well, you could take doesn't exist as a category in itself. I wouldn't even know what that means at that point. Because doesn't includes the not operator. If you're talking about like the not operator example I gave, doesn't is just a conjunction including the not operator. So you're basically saying does not exist. So it seems like you're still like invoking the reference of not there. I don't know how you could not invoke not. Like, I would need further explanation on that. Doesn't includes it grammatically, but needn't in a formal logic. Can you demonstrate that? Yeah, I would just need to see like the demonstration of that. What does that even mean? And I reject that it just includes it grammatically. Like, I think the reference there is still the same reference as the not operator. Like, can you disprove the not operator not using the reference of the not operator? Or do you reject references, I guess? Is this like an anti-realist argument? I guess I'm just kind of confused. I would need to see a demonstration of this. Especially because, like, I am not a logician at all. For example, you could have a logic comprised of exist equals ABC, doesn't exist equals DEF. Then the proposition doesn't exist, D equals true. Well, it's not just exist and doesn't exist. It's that doesn't exist can doesn't exist is more what it's like. So doesn't exist equals DEF because doesn't exist equals DEF is more of the problem. Like, it's not just say that like doesn't exist exists. It's going beyond that. It's trying to say doesn't exist doesn't exist. So DEF because of DEF. Like, is there a resolution to that? Because if doesn't exist equals DEF, if I say doesn't exist exist, so I'm saying DEF because DEF. Is there a resolution to that? Or is it just circular at that point? I don't really understand your objection, but I'm being a bit contrary, and I apologize. No, you're good. Well, that's the thing. Like, because that's my thought has always been that there's some aspects, like the logical operators, that just simply exist. Like, they're brute fact. Or axiomatic. Like, they prove themselves. And like objecting to them, you can object, but it's like you're not saying anything. Like, in virtue of saying the not operator does not exist, you're basically saying not P because not P. And so you're basically just making it like a circular argument, I guess. And so the not P or the existence of not just must exist. Or you would have to somehow say that not P can not be the case some other way. And I guess I just wonder what the way could be. So, like, I don't even know. It's because my understanding, right, is I would be like, I think this makes me an absolutist, right? It basically means that there's just things which just have to be the case. Because you can't, like, they literally can't be any other way. So, like, if I say, try to speak out of existence the not operator, I'm gonna invoke it. Which is why it's, like, one of the foundational things used in logic. Another example would be, like, the fundamental laws of prob logic, basically, or, like, classical logic, right? Your law of non-contradiction, like, if you try to prove it out of existence, the things you invoke to prove it out of existence can't be contradictory or can't violate it. So you, like, speak it into existence. I wouldn't really know what it means to say they exist, but I would agree that you can define them in a way which requires nothing in the world to create meaningful sentences. Yeah, that's probably all I'm saying. I guess I'm arguing, like, fundamentally they just, like, are the case. They're just that which are the case, I guess. Or they're just, like, simplicators. They just simply are there, I guess. Like, it's literally impossible to get rid of them. So whether you take that to be existence or not, like, whatever... Because existence may imply, like, within reality containing substance. But, like, it's not even that they're guaranteed to contain substance in reality. It's that they're just, I guess, brute fact, or they're just there. So they're just, like, axiomatic, I guess. Like, you could try to deny their existence, but it just, like, I don't know what you mean when you try to deny their existence, I guess, is my ultimate critique. I don't... And I could also be explaining it bad, too, but... Yeah, the example I was always given was the not operator. Like, not... just simply, it's just not exists simplicator is all I'm saying. It just simply exists, or it just simply is. Maybe even exist is implying too much, or just not is the case. And there's no way for that to not be the case, because you would invoke not, I guess. So that's what I would take to be like a foundation of truth, I guess. I think it's like universalism or absolutism is what I'm describing. So if you're familiar with those, I think that's what I'm describing. It might be a little bit off, but... Well, no, because those even talk about reality more. I guess I'm just talking simple brute fact, I guess. I don't know. That's what I think sets things to be true or not true, I guess. Like, you can't not use them, I guess, or invoke their reference. And I guess the objection you could throw the, like, anti-universalist or anti-realist objection, I guess, and just be like, I don't care. When I use the word not, it means something else. It's like, well, what does it mean without invoking not? It's like, I don't know. I don't care. I'm not going to tell you. The problem with saying exist is it's not clear what exist means. For example, if in the sentence the not operator doesn't exist, does not existing somehow invalidate the meaning of the sentence? Why? Yeah, so like by saying not operator does not exist, you're using the word not to say that not does not exist. Like, you're literally not saying anything. That is my objection. is like that sentence is meaningless. So since it's literally meaningless, and there's no way to construct a meaningful sentence without the use of not there, not just is the case. It's always there. Like, I'm basically claiming even more broadly that it's literally impossible for not to not be the case. Because even that sentence, like, you're literally saying, you keep using the word not to try to say that not doesn't exist. My entire objection is that makes no sense. It's basically like attempting to speak the not operator out of existence or out of meaning has no meaning. Like, it just makes no sense. So you're basically reducing to absurdity in an attempt to not use the not operator. I literally, if you do that, like, no one can understand what you're saying. So I guess the point is literally it doesn't make sense. Which then the higher point would be if something just has to be the case in order for things to make sense, then. But whether it's meaningless depends on the meaning of exist. For example, if there was a universe where English hadn't been invented and we said the word not does not exist, that sentence would be true if we restrict exist to that universe. The issue with, so this is like an anti-realist objection or like a postmodernist objection. Like, when I use the word not there, I think there is a reference, like a reference to the not operator. Like, whether it's niet or whatever language you use, like German, Russian, there's going to be some, like, reference or meta-language, like, thing referred to by the word not. That thing being referred to can't not exist. So it's just going to be the case for any language ever. You're going to have a not operator, I guess. So, like, I guess I just reject the, like, this rejection, I guess. Like, I don't even know what those words would mean at that point. Like, I guess the simple question would be, like, if the rejection is just like, oh, if English didn't exist, then this sentence would make sense. I guess the broader question would be, does language have reference? Like, is there a thing being discussed when I use a word? And if the answer is no, then I think it's just going to kind of become, this is the situation, right? So I guess when I use that word, I'm referring to something else. Actually, I'd say this is the opposite of postmodernism. A postmodernist would say the sentence can only be meaningful within a language community. I would say the sentence can be meaningful simply because the words can be given a meaning which makes the sentence well-formed, even if that meaning isn't used in any existent language community. Simply because the words can be given a meaning which makes the sentence well-formed. Then it seems like if it's not like a anti-realist objection, I guess I don't understand where the disagreement is. Because it seems like you would agree that the sentence not does not exist would be like nonsensical. Like, you don't know what that means, which is my point. Like, I don't know what that would even mean. Which is the argument, I guess. Like, there's some things that, like, there's no way to use them and not have a meaning there. I guess. trying to think of how to represent it in like a more fundamental way. Because I don't think there's a disagreement here then. So how would you represent this? So it'd be like, maybe I'll have to think about it. That's what I'm trying to think. Like, I'm trying to think what the heck the disagreement is. Because usually the people that fight me on this point are postmodernists. Like, they think when I use a word, there's literally no reference at all. I usually don't get into disagreement on this with anyone who's not that way. Like, I'm trying to think what the disagreement is. Because usually the objection is just like, well, that's just language you learned and that's meaningless. Which I would be like, well, do you think that? If that's the case, what did any of the words you just mean if they're meaningless, right? That's usually the type of people that I get argued with. I'm trying to present a skeptical position, essentially. No, I appreciate it because I'm trying to think what the resolution here would be. Because usually the people that argue against me on this would be just straight up postmodernists or like presuppositionalist Christians. Or people that run the tag argument or the transcendental argument for God. Normally I don't get any other perspective like this. So I actually really appreciate it. I don't know. Like, because that to me, I take it from the perspective of there are just simply things that exist. I guess, like, well, even, you can't even use the word exist, but it's more fundamental than that. I guess they're just transcendental or just, like, there always. I don't know. I might need to think of how to put it into, like, fundamental logic. The issue is I'm just not, like, a well-studied logician or, like, I'm trying to think of how that would even be. It would be like I'm saying, like, I'll just proof existing. So it'd be like exclamation point P because exclamation point P. The truth value. Oh, I guess the only proof is that it's just absurd upon a little bit of research. So, I need to get better at logic, like, because I think, okay, so this would be, if I'm reading this right, the proof of this is, so you would have, like, Control Z, I need, like, a way slower sensitivity. So you'd have, like, not P. That's not gonna work. Don't save. I appreciate this because this is making me think, like, super fundamental what I'm saying here. So it'd be like, let me make this bigger. So it would be like, what would this even be? It would basically be like, not P implies P. P implies not P. Therefore, not P. not P implying P. Oh my god. It's been forever since I've done this. Not P implying not P. P implying P. Therefore, not P implies P is a contradiction. Neither can ever be true in any traditional logic. Yes, that's the point. It's like the not operator has to be there, is the point. Because, like, if you say, like, not P if and only if not P. Then not P just must be there, I guess. That's like the point. Like, literally the point I'm making is, like, you can't not have not P if not P. It's literally just simply there are things that just are the case because of the law of non-contradiction. And one of them is the not operator. Like, not if and only if not is like the only logical response, I guess. I don't know. I'll have to look up if there's like a formal proof of it. But like, here's a maybe better way. Consider X. The operator is not meaningful. If the not operator is not meaningful, then X is true. But X contains the not operator, so the not operator is meaningful. Yeah, that might be it. Yeah. So it's higher order logic then. It could be like X contains Y. Or no, X contains X, basically. And I guess that's just like a fact of the matter. Consider X, the not operator is not meaningful. If the not operator is not meaningful, then X is true, but X contains the not operator. So the not operator is meaningful. Yeah, so it's like X contains X. So it would be X is Y, or like X is Y, or not is meaningful. X contain, or Y contains, or Y requires X always has Y. Something like that. So X must be the case. I don't know. This has been so freaking long since I've taken this logic course. I don't even remember the symbols in higher order logic. So I'm basically, at a fundamental level, I'm just saying X is Y. So not is meaningful. Meaningful requires not. I don't know. I'm sure someone's already written a proof of this, but I don't know. The really simple thing is just the not operator is self-evident. I don't. It just is. I have it because I remember our professor even did like, well, he wouldn't have even been a professor. He would have basically been a teacher, licensed as a practicing professor, but through the university. But it basically was, they did a proof of this. I don't know. It's been too long. I don't know. I don't think it's objectionable, I think, is the issue. But I think the only way you could object it is from a postmodernist or presuppositionalist perspective. I don't know. I don't know if there's another, like, realist way of denying it, I guess. I've never had a realist counter against that perspective, so I don't know. Oh, is it just simply double negation? Let P the not operator. X equals P. Is P meaningful? If X is true, then all parts of its sentences must be meaningful. Therefore, P is meaningful. Contradiction. Therefore, X is false. Let P, which is going to be set to the not operator, X is going to be P is P. If X is true, then all parts of its sentences must be meaningful. Premise. Therefore, P is meaningful. Contradiction. Therefore, X is false. Sure. I think that sounds closer to correct. It's been so freaking long. That sounds right to me. It seems like it's valid. Unless you've done formal logic, following this is going to be too difficult. That's what's tripping me up, because I've never had like a presuppositionalist Christian or like a realist take it all the way down to like prove the not operator. I don't remember the proof for the not operator. But looking it up, it must just be that like you're saying not P. So it's like exclamation exclamation P, which is just P. It's basically like negation. So it's basically saying like not P is the same as saying P. So like if you use the not operator again, or if you go like not, you're just back to P again, which makes no sense. Which now you've got a contradiction. I never seen formal logic ever being proof of a god. I've never heard of someone come to religion believe using Filbro argumentation. Yeah, I've never been brought there either. Most of the time, we just disagree on something higher. That's what's tripping me up about this. But you're good. I've done logic, lol, but just expressing a broader claim. Yeah, I don't know. I guess this is just my broader belief. I don't know. It's been forever. I don't know. They usually end up being circular. That's why, lol. Yeah, I guess that's the issue, right? Is that I haven't had anyone just be like, demonstrate it logically. I'm just like, it just is the case because it is the case. I don't know. I've never heard someone challenge that, I guess. I don't know. They're basically saying you could have not P and somehow still end up with not P. I guess. And I don't think that that's possible. I think it's definitely because if you have not P, you just have P definitionally, or it just is the case. So I don't know what the. I've never heard a refutation of that. I don't know. But again, I haven't like that was literally like 6 or 7 years ago, probably by this point, when I took logic classes. Like, I don't remember. I'm sure it's something like someone did, or like our professor probably didn't even like explain it because he's just like, well, the not operator, it just is the case. I don't know. It's usually only like postmodernists that deny that, or I end up with an argument against, and I don't know. I guess the only thing my only argument is just like, oh, I guess it just doesn't exist, or what you're saying makes no sense. I joined this convo late, so missed a lot, but yes, double negation would result in just P, not P is P. Yeah, okay. So I guess that's the thing. I guess it's just proven through double negation. Like the not operator just has to be there because if you say not P, then you're just back to P again. Or like now you have a contradiction. And I guess you could be the ultimate skeptic and be like, I don't care or whatever. But then I would just be like, I have no clue what you're saying, I guess. We just end up in a situation where I don't know what you're talking about. I guess that's my only response. I don't know. I guess this is my issue. Like, I guess I run into it with presuppositionalist Christians, but... Let me make another point on LGBT to hopefully persuade you with some intuition. Premise: we ought to respect other people's personal actions which don't harm others unless we have very good reason or evidence to. Okay, premise: we don't have strong evidence that every person engaging in polygamy is bad for them or others. We also don't have any non-empirical reason. Conclusion: we shouldn't judge those engaging in polygamy. Basically an argument from both epistemic humility and respect for others. From a fundamental like rights perspective, I think this set of premises seems correct to me. I guess I would have to think about if I disagree. To hopefully, so we ought. So premise one, respect other actions unless sufficient reason not to, or evidence. We don't have strong evidence. Conclusion: we shouldn't judge those engaging in polygamy. I guess I would reject premise 2, but I would have to do research again. I guess I would have to look again and see what the outcomes usually are. So, in a vacuum, I would agree with this statement. But I don't think premise 2 is true, that there's not sufficient evidence. But I could research again. I guess I do need like updated docs. Because since I've changed my opinion, I used to be fairly far left, so from personal experience, I could verify premise 2. But I would just reject your personal experience. I don't think that's a good measure. I don't think anecdote is going to ever convince me of anything ever. I would need to see this be borne out to be the case. The differences of relationship satisfaction. Relationship satisfaction, sexual satisfaction are key predictors of well-being. Contribute to quality of life. Assumptions are often made that the relationship and sexual satisfaction are heightened for those monogamous relationship configurations. This meta-analytic review challenges such assumptions by comparing the degree of relationship. Do we have... This is just an abstract. That's not sufficient. Would you at least agree that premise true is true for some people? Do you really want to commit to the position that every person engaging in polygamy has a worse life than if they weren't? No, I wouldn't commit to that position. So I would agree with the, like, a statistical based, like, caveat that not all people have literally worse lives total overall. Over the last 2 decades, there's been significant growth in public, political, and academic awareness of polygamy. Polygamous families have distinct household problems. The study aimed to ascertain the psychological impact. Cause. We have included both women and children because the impact of polygamous marriage might affect both groups. This review summarizes the available evidence. Leads to nothing. Do you not see that if it isn't true for someone, that you can't judge that person? I still think that there's some other issue present there. I would just go back to instrumentalization again. Like, I don't think you should do things just for the sake of doing them. So I would still judge that person. I guess I just wouldn't make it illegal, but I would certainly still be able to judge that person. But leads, causes, is the... So they aren't presenting causation either. Determining the impact of polygamous marriage on women and children worldwide could provide a better assessment than discrete primary studies. Identifying this impact can help give a clear understanding. This systematic review meta-analysis aimed to ascertain the psychological impact. We have included both women and children. So it doesn't look like this is conclusive. Symptoms assessed. Obsessive compulsive behavior. Mean differences in the symptom checklist. Revised scores among women in polygamous marriages versus those in monogamous marriages. Depression, anxiety, hostility, phobia, paranoia. There were 2 studies which reported the impact of polygamy on children. All scores for the psychological impact reported a slightly higher risk. Interpersonal sensitivity, depression, anxiety, hostility, phobia. I really don't understand your instrumentalization argument. You think you shouldn't do anything which only results in pleasure. So people shouldn't play games or watch Twitch or eat nice foods unless that is having some effect greater than increasing their happiness and welfare. Yeah, I mean, that just doesn't seem like a sufficient reason to do something. Like, just because something makes you happy, I guess at this point you would be unable to argue against bestiality, because if it makes someone happy to engage in bestiality, why shouldn't they do it? I guess, would you just accept bestiality as fine, I guess? Would just be your response? Seems like the only way you could turn that down is if you think you shouldn't just simply do stuff for your happiness or pleasure. At least not all the time. There were 2 studies. So like this one shows on average women and children both are going to have increased rates of mental illness. And I think this is a more recent study than what I've had. So it still seems the case that polygamy causes, in both women and children, increased mental illness rates. I don't think that's a disputable fact. Causes? I mean, the question would be marital interactions. Which mental illness? OCD is not present. Interpersonal sensitivity is increased. Among women. It looks like OCD is higher. Interpersonal sensitivity is higher. Depression is the biggest one, it looks like. Paranoia is the lowest, so we wouldn't say paranoia. I don't understand why you keep bringing things back to bestiality. Assumingly, you think bestiality is wrong because whilst it gives pleasure, it has some other negative moral effects. But if people engage in some activity which causes them happiness but doesn't have any other negative moral effects, then what is the justification for rejecting it? Oh, there would be no justification for rejecting it, but I would just say there are negative moral effects from those things. So, like, you still have a moral obligation to yourself, which is why bestiality is wrong. So I guess, and that's also a bit of a dodge, and this is kind of the issue I take, is like, what is, if you can literally do whatever you want as long as it doesn't like hurt some other agent and makes you happy, you would have to accept like we should legalize or like we should accept bestiality, which I think is obviously wrong. If someone is in a happy polygamous relationship with no mental illness, then what is the negative moral effect? I think you are putting yourself at risk statistically to be more likely to be mentally ill. You're like, this is begging the question. It seems like you're going to just be more predisposed to mental illness. So I guess I just don't accept that that's not the case. Like, you're certainly raising your odds of having mental illness. It's not. Well, I'm looking at the research. It hasn't changed. We'll look at this one. Non-monogamous people may just be happy. Non-monogamous satisfaction. The researchers collected previous studies, self-reported. So this was just self-reported satisfaction, which is nothing. Oh, what is this one? Recent opinion. The claim, married people, blah, 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 this Friday, blah, blah, blah. You're the one begging the question here, mate. Nope, that just begged the question because I don't accept that you're not putting yourself in increased distress by being in a polyamorous relationship. Institutionalized male privilege, yes. Modern polyamory. Egalitarian, often. Different phenomena, I don't reject that. You are raising your odds assumes, as I stated earlier, that polygamy makes it worse for everyone. But you already conceded that that is far too assumptive. So I guess the question would be, if I get... This seems off. Okay, here's another question then. No, that's going to get me demonetized. Or, I don't give a fuck. Is YouTube even... No. You agreed with me about that, and now you're saying the opposite. There just seems something off with that. What would be the issue? It's kind of like, oh, I'm smoking. Smoking is clearly putting you at increased risk for getting lung cancer. But I smoked, and hey, I didn't get lung cancer, so clearly it's fine. I feel like this is the same thing that you're doing here. Like, it is obviously raising your risk of increased risk for mental illness if you engage in a polyamorous relationship. Just because someone does that and they took the risk and then it turns out, oh, hey, it wasn't bad for me, doesn't make what they did, like, good for people to do or something we should encourage. There's nothing off with it. This is your personal bias coming in. Smoking, we know, increases the risk for everyone, whereas polygamy may not do so. I mean, it statistically does, though. I guess, could you demonstrate that the studies have changed? I just gave it research again. All I could tell you is I'll research again. If it's changed, it's changed. I don't think this is true. We have a causal mechanism which demonstrates why smoking always increases the risk. But any sex involves risk, so that between a straight couple is also not risk-free. What would the risk be? It's a slippery slope. How so? No, women are statistically shorter than men. So all women shorter than men? Taking antidepressants statistically, helps people with depression. So does it help everyone? No. Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with either one of those, but that seems like a non sequitur, both of those. Antidepressants could have a negative effect on some people. Yeah, but your overall risk-reward calculation is still better to take the antidepressant. I feel like that's a non sequitur. It's a direct analogy. No, because in order for that to be a direct analogy, polyamory would have to overall produce a better result and sometimes produce negative results, but it's opposite. That's a non sequitur. Antidepressants overall could produce a better result for people with depression, so it's something you ought do. I don't accept that this is the case with polyamory. How does one measure your overall risk versus reward? You can't have stats that suggest the overall risk reward for being in a poly relationship isn't so. You might take the antidepressant, find it's negative, then stop. Similarly, you might try monogamy, find it worse than polygamy, so stop monogamy. Why don't you accept that is the case? What is your proof for that? It just seems to be what the research shows. I don't know. You guys might have convinced me. Which research? All of it. It seems like it's just a fact that you're more likely to be mentally ill if you're in a polyamorous relationship and a woman. All of it? The vast majority, it seems, but something seems off still, but I'll have to think it through. You make very bold claims. I've done this research before. I mean, I used to hold your position. I hope you understand. So I've read all this research because I used to argue people the same way. I used to be very far left. Yeah, maybe it is an indefensible position, but okay. As like a broad rule, maybe. Could you reread my last comment? You might take the antidepressant, find it's negative, then stop. Similarly, you might try monogamy, find it worse than polygamy, so stop monogamy. Could you reread my last comment? Do you see how it is inevitable that someone has tried monogamy, found it worse than polygamy, then they're not making a mistake doing it? Yep, maybe there's a few people it works for. Yeah, maybe that is a bad point. You may have convinced me. Especially because it's not one I'm attached to. So okay. I think there's a lot of people it works for, mainly in the gay population. I guess this would still make sense with an instrumentalization as well. Because they have sufficient reason to do it, so they're not just doing it for the sake of doing it. Okay. That seems a maintainable position, actually. Might be. Actually, yeah, that makes sense. Well, honestly, it was great talking to you. Thank you for the stream. Yep. got to go. Fuck. You're good. Yeah, I appreciate it. No, I'm not out here like to be bad faith or anything. I'm genuinely like, I used to be like extremely far left. Some of these positions seemed a little off, but these are good arguments. And now that I think about it, it doesn't hold in my own view either. Well, I guess ultimately I wouldn't make it illegal either way. It's not like an illegality thing. So it's not even like a argument from like absolute should never do, or like we should go to the point of illegality. Fair. Yeah, I guess if I think about it, as long as you're not fully instrumentalizing, I think it's fine. So if you're sufficiently reasoning, it's still acceptable, even from like a higher view or ethical view. So maybe. Okay. I mean, that might be the case. That might just not be worth... So I might actually agree. So you could fight on a different grounds for that. So it still works. The only thing, though, is thinking through the consistency of it. So, like, starting to apply this rule across the board gets tricky, though. So there might be a different rule to follow in general. Well, it could still hold up, maybe. I don't know. It's weird. Well, I mean, that's the thing. That's why I'm asking about these. Because, right, I'm looking for a rule, or, like, one of my ultimate projects is looking for a rule to, like, resolve some of the difficult ethical questions. So maybe that's a better thing in general. Because I think that presents an issue still, but maybe. All right. Well, I mean, that's a 3-hour stream. I gotta wrap up. I try to stream for 3 hours a day, so I appreciate everyone that came out. Appreciate the conversations. I've got to go. Everyone follow who isn't following, and join the Discord, and yeah, have a good one, everyone. I appreciate everyone that came out.